Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Hunt Emrys, CPA with Parmelis and Associates. We got the last of the three-part series going over the 2024 benchmark report, where we went through hundreds of different shops' financial survey data to figure out what makes the good shops good, what makes the bad shops bad. Maybe a little bit of oversimplification, but that's what we're going to get into this week. Now, if you haven't heard the first two episodes, we went into an overview of this, of kind of some key KPI numbers and trends. 2 weeks ago, last week, we covered some different kind of data sets based on location, size, type of shop, and then kind of jumping around on this report, because if you don't have a copy of this report, reminder that the link is here in the show notes, but kind of skipped around because I wanted to highlight, I would say, the big idea on this in the last episode, which is what are some of the things that we can learn from the top shops? What are the things that maybe we should be avoiding based on some commonalities of some shops that might be struggling a little bit more? Before we get into that, I just wanted to stop and say thank you to you and the rest of the dedicated listeners for being a part of this show. Reminder, if you want to have a question answered on here, have an idea for a future episode, I'm always looking for ideas. Shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. And lastly, we cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NapaTrax and Promotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show. Say thank you to NapaTrax. Say thank you to Promotive if you see them. And if you're looking for a new shop management software or looking to add that person to your team, give Promotive a shout. So, like we did on the last 2 weeks, I'm not going to go down here and read this report. I recommend that you do this, but really of what we're going to talk about here is some of the stuff that is on the report. I'm going to go down through, but kind of my analysis behind this. To kind of start off with, we are going to be talking about the top shops and kind of a not very clever idea, but calling it the top versus the not, right? What are the top 10% doing that we probably should be doing as well or trying to mimic? And then what are the not or the bottom 10% doing as well that maybe we could learn something of, hey, what makes the good great and what makes the bad bad? Now, this is not as easy as it seems. Now, does this mean these are the top shops? These are the shops that I would take over if I was, in charge? No, not necessarily. Now, some of, shops that I would probably say, hey, I would, be interested in that shop are in the top. I wouldn't say any of the ones in the not or maybe something I'd be interested in, but probably some of my most attractive or what I would say the best run businesses are somewhere in between. Or when I'm talking about that, really of what I'm trying to do is set the tone of what we're talking about here. This is not the best shops. These are not the top run shops because that is subjective. I'm going to have an answer. You're going to have an answer. Everyone's going to have an answer, and they are all right. We are not talking about opinions. We are just talking about hard numbers. So when we are saying the top shop and we are saying the not shop, we are saying the top profitable shops. And the not is the not profitable shops. Okay? So do not get that twisted, and also meter your expectations on here. One of the metrics that is not measured on here, because we go down through and we measure a lot of stuff, is input, right? What we are measuring here is output. Profit is an output. Input is generally, in this sense, two things: capital and labor. And neither one of those can be underestimated, right? So what I mean by that is this. Let's say I said, hey, I have an investment for you that's going to give you $10,000 a year. What would you say? Yeah, I want it, right? What you actually don't know is you don't know how much it's going to take to earn that. And what I mean by $10,000 is an output, we need to know what the inputs are. And if we're talking about something for a small business, it's generally time and capital. So if we go back to the example of this investment, right, and you can change that to this investment as a repair shop, would you like this repair shop that gives you $10,000? Now, the fact I said repair shop, your ears are already perking up because you know what? Hey, if I'm going to make $10,000 in a repair shop, generally that means I have to do something for it. So now I'm starting to think, how many hours is it going to take me for earn that $10,000? And another thing, especially depending on how recently you started your business, hey, if I'm going to start a repair shop and make $10,000, I'm probably going to have to spend some money to get lifts and things like that. So what I just kind of gave you an example of how these numbers cannot be looked at in a vacuum. If you have a business that generates $100,000 a year, then on paper in this exercise is going to look exactly the same as any other shop that operates at a profit of $100,000. Now, we don't look at dollars and cents on this. Most of this was done in percentages. That's why it's applicable or comparable to different sizes. But if we have a business, and I think the top shop on here is one of them, the client's there generally every single day and probably working more than full-time hours. Now, I have some clients that are still averaging 20-25% profit margins while doing virtually little to no input, right? They are hands-off, they have second in commands and stuff like that. So generally, if we're looking for something that is the most profitable, and as we kind of get into this next report, it is going to be someone that is leveraging labor as much as possible. And I know that kind of the overall theme of my podcast is burying the lead, teasing you guys with some big revelation and then saving it to the end. I'm going to start this at the beginning. There is one thing and one thing alone that has allowed us to kind of be able to judge what the profit is going to look like given a couple inputs. There is a ton of inputs, as you will see on these next pages, that are very, very bad at estimating on how good or bad the business is going to be from a profit standpoint. Labor sales, average sales, monthly sales, labor rate, number of technicians, car count, none of that stuff is a good indicator of profit. Now, one thing that absolutely is productivity. And in a bigger sense of it, is efficiency and productivity for the overall enterprise. There is a saying, and the saying is based in truth, right? I mean, this is part of the reason why we did this exercise. Is there stuff I've always said and I've always felt, and this is not novel ideas. I've been, taught this over the years, and other people have told me this, but this benchmark really gives firsthand data that I think is virtually impossible to argue the statement. Now, the statement is if you want a very profitable business, you need to run your business understaffed. If you want a very easy business to run, you want to run it overstaffed, right? Now, when you think about that, it seems fairly simple, yet the idea sometimes is kind of ignored. If you have a shop that does $1 million a year and you got 3 employees, it's a lot easier to make money than the same business with 8 employees. Simple facts, right? There is legal amounts that you have to pay people, and there's also certain amounts that you need to get someone qualified. The more bodies that you have in there, the more sales you need just to pay for the bodies, right? So think about those bodies as overhead. If you only have yourself, you don't have any labor costs. So whatever you're selling in labor sales is going to you. Now, compare that to someone that has 20 mouths to feed. How many labor sales do you need until that money is now going to come to you? Same exact idea. Now, also that is not kind of factored in here is the stage of business that you're in. And again, you can run your business however you want. But what I generally see, and I think I can probably agree with this logic, is kind of a bell curve on profitability for most small businesses, and auto repair shops are really no different. So the way that this bell curve generally looks is when you first start your business, you probably aren't going to make a lot of profit. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be things that are going to go right. You're going to learn from those. You're going to grow. Maybe you hire a coaching company. Maybe you have a revelation. Maybe you just kind of figure out the right team. But generally, as the business grows and continues on, profitability will increase. Now, maybe you get to this point, and some people do and some people don't, but there gets to a point where you've kind of figured out how to run this business. You figured out what the sweet spot is for size, what your niche clientele is, and you've really kind of maximized that business. At that point, that's what we would kind of see as the peak of that bell curve. Hey, this is the maximum amount of profitability that this business can probably crank out. Now, what most people realize is that peaked out, right? You're redlining this business for all intents and purposes is probably not sustainable, right? You are operating on all cylinders. You're at 100% productivity, 100% efficiency. Think about your shop if you were booked 2, 3, 4 weeks out during COVID. It's probably exactly that. You were printing money. It is not the best business to run. It is not the best business to work for. It's a little bit of a stressful environment. So while I might see a business operating at 20, 30% net profit at that point, I don't generally see people ride that for 5, 10, 20 years. Now, yeah, sure, some people do, and some people are very diligent on this and have different ways to run the business, as we'll get into in a second here. But really, a lot of times what I see is people generally kind of pulling back on that profit, especially from a percentage standpoint, right? Think about it. If you're making a 20% profit at $2 million, that's $400,000 in profit. Whereas if you're at $10 million and you're making a 15% profit, that's $1.5 million. So the percentages is important sometimes, but at some point the percentages kind of go out the window and we're talking dollars and cents. But what a lot of people find out is, hey, I could go instantly from 25% to 18.5% profit and also reduce my input from maybe 2,000 hours down to 500 because I'm going to forego some of my profit and pay a general manager or pay 2 general managers or get a regional manager, whatever it is. And those shops are in this study, right? The later stage shops where, yeah, if you want to plan to probably keep this shop for the long haul and not change much, then you probably should not be in this top group because this top group is growing. Some of this is comfortable, some of this is uncomfortable, right? All of these people made money. Not all of these people probably had the best time doing it is probably the long and short of what I can say. Now, kind of going down through here again, read this stuff, look at these charts, but one of the biggest differences is productivity. The top shops average about 20% higher productivity than the lower shops. And to put it in another words, about 50% higher, right? 40% productivity versus almost 60% comparing bottom to top. The biggest thing that I got out of this one is that you should not ever let anyone tell you on how to run a shop, especially if it's going to be, this is the way that you need to do it. If you have someone that says, hey, you need to increase your sales, if they're ultimately looking for a bottom line dollar, yeah, there is some situations where you want to increase sales. And if it's in the vein of productivity, then great. But if they think, hey, you need to have a higher, grossing shop, there's no correlation between the two. Yeah, if your expenses are all the same, if your gross profit is relatively the same, then yeah, having more sales come through your business is going to make you more money. But that's not a novel idea, right? That is just working harder, not smarter, right? And that does not mean that you're working stupidly. It's like, well, if you want to make more money, you just need to sell more. That's not a novel idea. Now, one of the things here that is curious is a lot of this stuff is often talked about, right? Hey, how much are you doing in sales? How much is your average repair order? What is your car count? Okay. Just like I said for the last 2 weeks, look at that. It's a good number. It might be relevant to you, but it probably is not. And that's the long and short, right? I have seen so many different kinds of shops that it really kind of opens my eyes because I still to this day see people doing this differently. Actually, an episode that I'm going to record shortly after this kind of goes into highlighting one of those. And just again, of me looking at some different how to run a business or how to price things or how to compensate your employees. Again, something I've never seen before. Probably on paper, I said that won't work. And then someone proves me wrong. Wow. You proved me wrong because never thought it would work. Hypothetically, it doesn't, but you just did it, right? And so when I see so many of these shops kind of break the mold on this, when I see that my top shops and my bottom shops are doing a lot of the same things, does that mean that this is all chance? Does that mean that this is all luck? No. If anything, what we're seeing here is a lot of the financial data is probably an output and not an input. What I mean by that is, hey, are the top shops the one that are selling their labor for the most? No. Are the top shops the one where the labor is using their time most effectively? Absolutely, right? Now, what goes into that a little bit more is, well, what's behind that productivity? Do I think that the top shops have the best technicians and the bottom shops don't? Not necessarily, right? This could be good people. This could be bad advisors not getting these guys enough hours. They could be very efficient, but not very productive if they're calling out 6 hours and the advisor's selling them 3. Now, are you going to have a top shop that has a service advisor undercutting hours, a foreman that is not dispatching the work correctly? Probably not, right? And so what we really see here is the only real commonality behind this is being a good leader and being a good manager because people are your lifeline, right? How many times can you go down through and look at your shop or look at a period or look at a year and be like, we just didn't have a good year because we did not have the right people in place? Now, how many times can you look at the exact opposite of when it was like a light switch going off or a light switch going on? Hey, we got that rock star in there, completely changed the production, completely changed the overall morale of the shop. And we've been kind of, off to the races ever since. When you're looking at how people are paid, this is one of the biggest things that comes out and one of the biggest arguments that I see. Should you pay your technicians flat rate? Should you pay them hourly? Should you pay your service advisors flat rate? Should you pay them hourly? If you go to any shop owners group, you're going to have both sides of this, and both sides are going to say the other one is wrong and there's no way that you can ever run a shop. Now, I've told you, and I kind of told you this a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but I will tell you again because it's that important. This is split 50-50 right down the middle for the top shops. And also, most importantly, this is split 50-50 right down the middle for the bottom shops, which means that half of the bottom shops are paying their guys flat rate and paying their advisors commissions. Now, are they getting much flat rate hours? Are they getting much commissions? Probably not, or hopefully not. Now, there's a reason that they could be the bottom shops because maybe they are hitting commission goals and those commissions are not set properly, but we don't really know for sure, do we? Now, the top shops, are all of those guys create an environment where these guys eat what they kill? No. About half of my shops are paying their guys a flat amount. Whether they blow it out of the water or whether they don't, they're getting a salary, they're getting an hourly amount. Yet a lot of these people are still extremely productive and even more productive than someone that is based on commission or based on flat rate. Why? We don't know, right? This is the tricky part about labor. This is the tricky part about, dealing with employees and dealing with your team is you don't know what makes one person tick. But being a good manager, being a good business owner, being a good leader probably means that you're a little bit better with dealing with the team that you have and dealing with the labor. And as we can see here, one of the only lasting things or one of the only kind of, early indicators of this is if you can manage your team and you can motivate your team to be productive and be efficient, doesn't guarantee that you're going to have profit, but it's going to make it much, much easier. So whether you're looking at this of saying, man, I am amongst my peers, and maybe your shop's numbers are even in this and you're feeling pretty proud of yourself, then you should be, right? This is to be a top shop. That is to say something, right? This is an achievement. You've made a lot of money, even if you are working a lot, right? So what I said before of saying, hey, these are not necessarily the shops that I want, it doesn't mean that I'm saying, hey, these guys, are working too much. Not at all, right? Are my top shops working any harder than some of my bottom shops? Absolutely not. The best thing about this is you can say, hey, I am working my butt off and I'm making 30-35% profit margin. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people working 10 times harder than you, making 10 times less money. If you're going to work your butt off, you might as well make profit doing it. Kind of the nightmare scenario is if you're working 2,500 hours and you're still not making any money. But hey, there's always next year, there's always room for improvement. And even if you are in this top shop, I guarantee that you probably have a couple aspects that even you can improve on. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you kind of enjoyed the last couple episodes we did where we went down through this. And yeah, would love to hear your thoughts. Would like to hear your feedback. And if you have an analysis that you think, Hunt, you missed this altogether and here's what I think, I would love to hear it. As always, please share with friends, fellow shop owners, and anyone you think that could benefit from this. And if you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Thanks again to Napa Tracks and Promoda for being such awesome sponsors. And thanks for listening on the Aftermarket Radio Network. You can find all shows on the aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listing apps. So thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all next week.